Hello everyone, welcome back to the May 22nd Call of Duty DFS Slate breakdown. I quickly apologize for not having the video yesterday. I actually did record it, I just somehow never got to upload it because it just must have slipped my mind after I recorded it. I must have immediately started something else, I'm not sure, but pretty disappointing for me either way. I think if you guys follow the advice I gave you yesterday, you probably wouldn't have been doing that well anyway, so maybe it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise. We can quickly recap, even though I didn't give out picks yesterday. I like to recap anyway, that way we can have an idea of where at least my head's at, and we can talk about making sure that I'm keeping up to date with where the teams are and all that stuff. So New York versus Paris, although you guys might just have to take my word for it, I actually was on New York a lot. The map set was pretty good as well. I did expect the bocage coming out, and that did end up happening. The map has not been paying that crazy lately. I'm unsure. I'd have to find some stats. It'll be something I'm going to have to look into this week, is finding out some more bocage stats and trying to compare it to the rest of the map stats. I don't know. When I look at these scoreboards, I don't see anything too crazy. Although I do look here and I do see, Jimbo with a 36 bomb, Hydra and Kismet at 30s, Paul almost at 30. Like, it was still better than everything else, but I don't know if it's worth as much maybe as I was giving it credit for in the past. So, yeah, I like New York a lot. They were pretty solid. Looked pretty good. I think this New York series cards went it went exactly as expected. LA Seattle, this one went very awry. Again, when I kind of talk about what I said yesterday, you guys might have to take my word for it because the video didn't get uploaded, but I was on LA Thieves. I expected LA Thieves to be pretty good. I thought LA Thieves were pretty underpriced overall. They were the favorites. I think they were priced as the underdog. They were simply mispriced. So I did like LA. I liked particularly Draza and Octane. So I did like the two players that were the best from LA Thieves. So, again, kind of silver lining there. I do think I had the right players. It was just the wrong team. It's funny because I did end up saying in that video that although LA is the favorite, and I think Seattle's been kind of up and down, the volatility from both of these teams is pretty wild. We expect LA has been really high, really low. Seattle's been really high, really low as well. And I think that's exactly what we got yesterday. We got a pretty decent high from Seattle, pretty low from LA Thieves. I was still pretty low on LA overall. I don't know if they play again tomorrow. We'll talk about that when we get there. But I still think LA is a little bit overrated. I liked LA to win this matchup against Seattle, but I did say that I would not be surprised if the underdog Seattle went and 3-0'd them, just because that is a possibility. So maybe that's something to keep in mind where, maybe we kind of just have to embrace the volatility here sometimes. I'm not sure, but I did think the underdog Seattle was definitely live in this one, and we got that one wrong, although you guys were not there for that. Minnesota, Florida. This was a pretty tough one. I was pretty split on this one. I did end up leaning towards Florida. It did end up being the incorrect call again here. Priesta and Attach have been playing pretty good lately. It's kind of been everyone except for Standy, which is odd because I think he's kind of objectively their best player. Although his numbers and his gameplay really hasn't shown that lately. I still think he's their best player. In terms of maybe upside or just kind of raw skill. They ended up getting the kind of almost reverse sweep. They got smoked in map 1 pretty bad. This one was Florida, all the way through. Pretty good map from Sky's Awakening. Dave Patty was there pretty decently. And then maps 2, 3, and 4 all went towards Minnesota. So they ended up getting the win. They did let the bocage through here as well. That's something I did touch on, but you guys were not there, obviously. Overall, I think these are two pretty decent teams. These are probably like number 5 and 6 or number 4 and 5 when it comes to overall team skill. I've been pretty impressed with both these teams. I thought it was going to be a lot closer than it was. I was the maps were close, so I guess it could have gone either way. I just think these are two really good teams. I thought Florida would have been able to outperform them a little bit more in the respawn game modes. They did end up losing the control and the hard point. Even the search and destroy was pretty close. So Minnesota managed to squeak by all 3 wins. I feel like the score is a little bit deceiving in that area, but yeah, I think the pretty decent read, although I was on the wrong side. Then for this last one, Atlanta Boston. This one I kind of had I don't know. This one's a little weird because I did like Atlanta FaZe. I thought FaZe would probably get the job done 3-0 or 3-1. I actually did end up liking Arcides, surprisingly enough. I thought he was pretty underpriced, and he typically performs in these style of maps, and I actually did get these maps right. I mean, not this one. My apologies. I was thinking more so about like the control. It was a close bocage, kill wise. Actually, it was I think just a 2 kill lead for the Atlanta FaZe. It was a lot from Celium, but this is more the bocage I'm talking about. All of FaZe at 30 bombs, almost double 40s from the for the Boston side. They just needed more from Capsule. They could not get that. Again, relatively decent read. I thought Atlanta FaZe was a big favorite. I thought it would be a little bit closer than it was. Granted, the control maybe went to the final round. The hard point was a little bit closer. I still think this one was fine. Not too much to talk on. FaZe were pretty big favorites. They got the job done. Not much else to write home about. So we can move on to tomorrow. The first matchup. Oh, geez, I shouldn't have closed all those breaking point tabs here. But the first match is Paris Legion versus Los Angeles Gorillas. So pretty interesting one. I'm honestly very unsure what to make of this one here as well. I feel like we have seen kind of varying levels of LAG here and pretty varying levels of Paris Legion as well. So LAG have brought back Gunless in replace of Spart. I do think that's an improvement, but they were the worst team in the league with Spart, despite them, on this recent run at least. I mean, they won Major 2 and then went on a 6-game losing streak. So that's very, very interesting. Don't know what to make of that. Off the bat, my initial lean is just kind of, I'm a little confused on how Paris is how disrespected they are, maybe a little bit. We might have to look at the individual maps here. Let's see. Paris is very close in the respawn game modes. It looks like LAG is the edge in their search and destroys a little bit more. I think that's fair. I definitely agree with that assessment. I definitely think LAG is probably better in the search and destroys, although their records are pretty close. I do feel like Paris has been a little bit hard done by their schedule. They got swept by New York, which is not a big deal. I think New York's the second best team in the maybe third best team in the league. I'm not sure. Seattle's, we know, a kind of up and down team. It's hard to gain too much from that. They lost to London in a close series, swept by New York again. I mean, they did beat LAG here on Group D Match 4 in the Classic. That was with Spart, I should add. I think they're a little bit better now with Gunless again. And then Boston, they lost 1-3. So it feels like Paris has not really played anyone around their skill level. They've only played teams that are, it feels like, better than them. I think this is going to be a pretty even match. I don't necessarily agree with LAG being a -165 favorite here. I think this is pretty close, all things considered. In terms of maps and vetoes, I would expect LAG to ban the Bocage. They're now 0-3 on it. That's one of their most banned maps. I would expect them to go to the Bocage ban, unfortunately. This is the first series of the day, so we don't need to worry too much about that. We will have picks and bans out beforehand. But I expect LAG to ban the Bocage. Paris Legion, I'm not sure what they would end up doing in terms of their ban. They might end up going towards the Berlin, just because they haven't played it that much. They have not played it once in these 7 series. Maybe they ban Tuscan because it's the only hardpoint map that LAG's won. I'm not sure what they do, but there's options here. And it looks like Gavutu is going to be one of them. I don't love that map really for either side. I'm just leaning with LAG or the Paris here. I do worry that the LAG might be a little bit uh, stronger now with Gunless coming back. Again, another thing here is Paris are ridiculously expensive. Considering that the Paris is the underdog and Temp and Gravity are both almost at 10,000 each, that is very, very hard to get to. Jimbo at 6 seems a little underpriced. I know his stats are not great. His stats are really bad, actually. He's very up and down. We've seen some crazy high highs and some crazy low lows from him. But at 6K, he just needs to kind of get you 100. I think that's possible. I don't like this series. If anything, looking at these price tags, I might just kind of leave it alone because I'm leaning towards Paris, but paying those price tags is going to be really, really tough because I think there's other options I'd want to get to. Granted, that might be what a lot of people do, so then maybe you can argue that there's like a leverage play here with Paris. They're not going to be X'd out for now, but I'm just going to lean towards them. I'm going to lean towards Temp and Gravity at 10 and 9.8. We'll keep them on the radar here a little bit, but we'll have to look at the rest of the slate to see if we really want to get them in. Up next is the Atlanta FaZe versus Texas Optic Texas. This is obviously a really important match, a pretty big match for the whole league and for the outlook of this slate and all that stuff. Is a pretty big match. Obviously, this is probably the number 1 team and the number 2 team battling it out. Just depends on what order you want to put them in. Obviously, Optic Texas have the substitute in still. They have Prolute in for Illy. That does change things for sure. That's probably why we're seeing a Atlanta FaZe slight favorite. I don't think Atlanta FaZe have not beaten Optic Texas yet all year. So let's see. Optic Texas beat Atlanta FaZe here in, let's see, they beat them at the Major 1 tournament. They beat them twice there, once in the grand finals, once in the round robin, or I guess group stage. They beat them there in the qualifiers 3-0. They beat them in the playoffs here, so Optic has beaten them 4 times. So that's tough. Like it's pretty tough. Like on one hand, FaZe have not beaten Optic at all. You could see FaZe don't lose except for when it's versus Optic. Like if we look at anything other than the Kickoff Classic, which is kind of laughable, they lost to Optic, Seattle, Optic, LAG in a grand final, and then Optic. Like that's 5 defeats and 4 of them, or like 4 out of their 6 defeats are to Optic. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 out of 5 defeats have been to Optic. So it's like Atlanta FaZe are the best team in the league, except for when they're playing Optic. I really don't know what to make of this one. Everyone in this series is a little bit underpriced, especially when you look over like Dashy at 8.4, Celium at 8.4. That's where the problems kind of arise, I think. It's really hard to justify paying like a Temp and Gravity 10 and 9.8 at when you look at these Atlanta and Texas price tags. Excuse me. But on one hand, again, nobody probably is going to be using Temp and Gravity, and I do think those two have really good upside. If Paris win, it's going to be through those two most likely. They can have really big performances, especially Temp. We've seen pretty big numbers from him. If we look at Gravity's match history, I'm not sure how it'll shape out. Yeah, I mean, he's had some 100-pointers, but at 9.8, that's a really tough price to pay there. So I don't know. We'll come back to that and just stop skipping around. Atlanta FaZe Optic Texas. I'm not sure. This one's very close. My initial lean is just to kind of go with the Optic Texas side again, just because I think they've still been playing pretty strong. I think people have kind of been underestimating them a little bit. But on one hand, they've been doing it heavily through the Search and Destroys, as we could tell in the in the recent matches. My brain's a little bit gone at the moment. Optic is only 6-5 in hardpoint, 4-3 in the control, but very strong with the 6-2 in search and destroy. Then Atlanta FaZe is pretty opposite. They're 8-2 in hardpoint, 6-0 in control, with a lackluster search and destroy effort. So it's very hard to ignore Atlanta FaZe here. They're pretty cheap. A lot of people are probably going to be getting them in. I think all of their players are viable. Celium is going to be like 60 or 70% owned or something. He's severely mispriced. He's way too cheap. I think there's definitely argument for both sides, like to play a little bit of both sides here. Like I think you could definitely go with Dashy and Celium at 8-4. They're both underpriced for sure. Scump at 6-6 seems a little underpriced. Heck, yeah, I feel like even Simp and Shotzi at 9-4 and 9K are underpriced. Like it's good. Like there's a lot of options here. I'm very fine with getting on both sides. Even I wouldn't get too crazy. I'd probably leave it to like 3 of them. Like if, for example, you want to do Celium, Simp, and Dashy, that's probably going to be like the most popular version, but I'm fine going there as well. Again, close series. I favor Atlanta in the respawn game modes, which is what we care about more when it comes down to these DraftKings scoring and DFS slates. So we'll move on here. I want to quickly look at the team slot. Atlanta FaZe is the favorite, even though there's 2,600. That's happened again. I don't know what they're doing. Maybe that was pre-pro loot. I'm not sure, but Atlanta FaZe is mispriced as a team slot. They're probably going to be extremely popular. So again, I think there's possibility to get some leverage here, maybe on the field. I think people are going to be on Atlanta FaZe pretty heavily. I think this is a decent spot for Optic. It just worries me. These numbers worry me. That's all it comes down to here for me. I'll just leave it there. I'll just leave with my gut. I'm not going to do any extra tweaking or anything. I'll go with Atlanta FaZe. I think they are better in the respawns. Their numbers say that significantly. Optic have a substitute. I think this one's a slight lean towards Atlanta. I'll eat the chalk there. Then we have final up Toronto versus New York. Or I guess we should talk about maps here. So we know Atlanta FaZe want to try to get to Bocage. They're probably going to be banning Berlin. That's usually the way they go. Optic Texas usually go for a Gavutu ban. Maybe sometimes they ban Berlin on their own. But historically, they've been banning Bocage against FaZe. Nobody wants to play FaZe on Bocage. It is possible. Maybe Optic try to surprise them a little bit. Although I doubt that after yesterday. Atlanta FaZe looked really strong on Bocage yesterday. I can't imagine Optic would say that, hey, they want a piece of that. So I think, unfortunately, probably going to get Optic banning Bocage again. Atlanta probably going to go ban to the Berlin. And then we go to the Gavutu and the Tuscan yet again for these two teams. And I think those are still fine for FaZe. Like, I'm not going to change that too much. I think those are still fine for FaZe. We can move on here now finally to the Toronto and New York one. I'll be honest, this one's a little bit weird and surprising to me. I do not think Toronto Ultra are on the New York Subliners level here. I'm kind of surprised New York is only a -175 favorite. I think they're a good bit better than Toronto is, especially when it comes to the respawn game modes. Like, New York's match history is absurd. They've beaten everyone except for Atlanta FaZe. No big deal there. They have a 3-1 win over Toronto. Like, I don't see what this is here. New York -1.5 at plus money. That feels really good to me. I rarely recommend bets. You guys know that. I rarely recommend bets because I think there's not a lot of value to be had here. But New York -1.5, that feels fine. I could definitely see New York dropping maybe a search and destroy, maybe a control. I'm not sure, but I think they're going to have a good bit of a lean in the hard points. They're going to have a good advantage in the controls. I could definitely even see New York winning the search and destroy. I think the 3-1 or 3-0 potential for New York is definitely better than 50 whatever percent, or like 49 or whatever percent this plus 105 bet is. I definitely think there's a good bit of value to be had at New York Subliners -1.5. I definitely don't agree with this price tag. I think New York is a good bit better. They should be winning the respawns. They could have the upside to win the search and destroy. I think New York win this 3-0, maybe 3-1, and that -1.5 cashes. When it comes to DraftKings, I do like New York. They are pretty expensive though. Hydra at 10-2, Paul at 8-6. I mean, Krim and Kismet are pretty affordable. I wouldn't go back to Kismet. His numbers still don't support his good day yesterday. So I'm fine just going back to maybe Hydra if you can get up to that price tag. Krim 6 at 7-2 is affordable. Paul at 8-6 is definitely affordable. I like a lot of the New York guys. Again, they've just been outslaying and winning these respawn game modes pretty heavily. Toronto gets outslayed pretty heavily in these game modes. As you guys can see, they're not positive kill death ratio in either hardpoint or control. New York is positive in hardpoint and control. I think they get the job done on these respawn game modes, especially help our DraftKings scoring out a little bit. I like New York here. When it comes to Bocage, it's definitely possible. That's another thing to keep in mind. Toronto kind of banned everything, like a lot of stuff across the board. So maybe they do ban the Bocage. It's possible though. I wouldn't exit out. But there's not I don't think there's a high chance of Bocage in any of these series, so I'm not going to put too much stock into it. I do think it's most likely to come through in Toronto versus New York, because I don't think Toronto are scared of Bocage, but maybe they're scared of the New York Subliners 6-0 Bocage, though. That's the thing that scares me a little bit about it. I mean, Toronto ban everything. New York really good on Bocage. It just kind of makes sense. Then it comes back to maybe what do New York want to ban? I'm not sure. Maybe they ban the Berlin just because Toronto's 3-0 on it. So maybe they go to the Gavutu and the Tuscan. New York is yet to play Gavutu. Maybe they ban that. I'm not sure. But I think mainly when it comes down to trying to decipher picks and bans, it's just whether Bocage is being played, and I don't think so. So I'm not going to overthink this one too much. We're just going to go with New York. New York is probably my favorite impactful slate or impactful team on the slate. I like getting them in a good bit. I feel like they outslayed Toronto pretty heavily, and they're going to be a pretty important part of this slate. So we'll look at the overall stats here for all three of the teams that I'm leaning towards and I've mentioned. We're again setting this just to Pro-Am Classic and Major 3 qualifiers. That's probably the last 3 or 4 weeks of sample size, so it's a good bit to get in. Obviously, we're going with New York, probably going with FaZe, and then maybe Paris or LAG. We'll probably compare those two. Let's see, Paris, LAG. So yeah, I mean, it's been Temp and Gravity. Everybody else, not a single positive kill ratio on LAG. It's tough. I'm just gonna go with Paris, whatever. Atlanta, New York. So as we could see, there's definitely some standouts here. Celium, Temp, Simp, Gravity, Hydra are probably your top 5. Paul's a little bit close to them. RCDs is putting up some decent numbers there. He's super, super cheap. Again, I think that's definitely an option. I feel like RCDs is kind of a big game player. It does feel a little bit unlikely that he has 2 really good matches in a row, but I mean, he's been on a somewhat decent tear. I say that pretty hesitantly. Like, he's 6,400, and if he gives you 100 points, you're probably chilling. And he does that pretty consistently when they win recently. I guess as I scrolled down, that changed. But he's been picking it up. Like the first part of the year, pretty bad. Then he hit a point here around March. And then he's had 3 100s, a 50, 2 100s, an 80, and then another 140. So I'm definitely fine getting to RCDs there. I do feel a little bit worried about triple stacking that. But I feel like it's still okay. If you want to get to Celium, Simp, and RCDs, that's definitely fine. If you want to do Celium and RCDs, that's good for saving salary. Maybe if you want to get up to somebody like Paris, it's a decent, probably a relatively unique style. Maybe if you want to pair them up with New York, you could definitely put up like a Hydra captain and then go with Celium and RCDs. That's an option. I think if you want to get a little bit more balanced, I wouldn't hate you if you put Texas into this as well. Yeah, like Dashy's going to be up there as well. He's at a 1.23. Illy's not playing, so disregard him. So Celium and Dashy, 2 highest on the slate even. Then you have Temp, Simp, Gravity, Hydra, Paul. Scump's at a 1.05. He's super cheap. I kind of glossed over him a little bit, but he was somebody I noticed for sure. 66. Again, it feels like the best 4 plays in this card are all at the bottom. Dashi and Scump are super cheap. Celium and RC is super cheap. If you wanted to do Dashi and Celium, I think that could be a little bit of a more unique style. But again, that's kind of tough. It's tough to argue that on a 3-gamer playing people against each other like that. It's a little tough, especially without Bocage, I should add. I do recommend people game stack Bocage occasionally, but I'm not seeing it that much here in this scenario. Just because Optic typically do ban the Bocage against FaZe, like I mentioned earlier. So that kind of leaves us in a weird spot, I think. To quickly kind of recap here, I'm gonna lean Paris over LA. I feel like the more I talked about it, and the more I've kind of molded over a little bit as we've been talking here. I kind of like Paris a little bit more. I feel like this is gonna be a close match. Paris definitely worries me. There's a pretty lackluster team. LAG could kind of pull things together. I feel like LAG is a little bit similar to Seattle in a way where they can win a lot and also lose a lot. It's just hard to argue with the stats that LAG have been putting up lately. It's been really lackluster, probably the worst in the league. So I'm just going to kind of err on the side of statistics there, and I'll go with Paris, specifically Temp and Gravity. Although they're super expensive, I think that, again, kind of opens up a little bit of a leverage spot. If you want to get a little bit unique, you can go down to, the players I mentioned earlier. Scump, R-Cities are pretty underpriced. If you want to go to Scump or R-Cities, go up to Temp and Gravity. I think that's a unique style and one I'm going to employ a little bit. I think it definitely makes sense. Atlanta, Texas, I'm pretty torn on this one. We talked about it again when we talked about the series. Texas have beaten FaZe 4 times in a row. It's been all Optic all time. They don't have their full roster. They have ProLoot now instead of Illy. I do think that it hurts them a little bit, but there's just something there that worries me where Optic are here. They're going to be playing against a big team. Like, I don't know if the sub is going to matter that much, and I worry people are going to be on Atlanta heavily. This is tough. We'll talk about this at the end. Because I quickly just want to say New York, Toronto, I like New York a lot. I think they're pretty underpriced. No, actually, that's not true. I feel like maybe Krim and Paul are a little bit underpriced, but I feel like they outslay Toronto a lot often in these respawn game modes that we talk about so much. I like Hydra, I like Paul, I like Krim. I probably would still leave off Kismet despite his strong performance yesterday. I'm not going to put a lot of stock into one game yet. And then we have a couple picks that we like. The problem is it comes down to what do we like here with Atlanta and Optic. I'm just not sure where people are going to go in this one. I expect Atlanta probably to be super popular. Celium's numbers have been off the board. It's hard to argue with that. I kind of lean towards Optic a little bit now that I'm kind of thinking about it. Maybe it's kind of an unnecessary risk. Maybe you don't even need to get weird, because I think people are going to go towards Atlanta and LAG pretty heavily because LAG is the favorite, but they're priced very cheaply. So you could definitely get LAG and Atlanta into your lineups. I personally don't like doing that, but it's probably going to be one of the more popular builds because it makes sense. I like going. I'm just gonna say it. It feels kind of wrong. I'm gonna be honest. I'm very torn on this one. I think you could definitely argue just play Dashi and Celium and call it a day. That's probably what I'm gonna try to do in some lineups. But I kind of like going towards Optic and getting a little bit of leverage here. I think Celium is gonna be the most popular play on the slate. So if you want to go to Texas a little bit more and maybe leave off Celium, or maybe play play Texas with Celium, I think that's a viable strategy, and one I think I might employ a little bit. I might put that in like my main big lineup and just get weird with it. I'm not sure, but I think there's options there. In terms of making like an official pick, I'll go with Optic Texas here again. Again, it does worry me a lot, especially for DraftKings, that they're not winning respawns that much. Atlanta FaZe have been really strong in their respawn game modes. But I just feel like there's a little bit of a different tone when it comes down to Atlanta versus FaZe, or Optic versus FaZe. two best teams in the league. Everyone's going to bring their all, and I don't think Optic's going to roll over. Maybe like maybe people kind of expect a little bit when it comes down to, for example, just because like Optic has the whole substitute thing, people might think they're gonna not be that great. I'm fine. Like I'll beat it. I'll eat the chalk here, maybe, or not the chalk. I'll eat the risk of of going with Optic here. Hopefully it's kind of overlooked. I'm not sure, but that's where I'm gonna be. I'll play Optic Texas. Maybe they're the leverage spot that we need, and I think if people are gonna kind of avoid playing Optic, even though the stats maybe kind of say that Optic's won 4 in a row, I don't think like Proloot versus Illy is that big of a drop off. I know it definitely does hurt them, but I don't think it's gonna be that problematic. I think Optic have enough ability to win it through their stars, through Shotzi, through Dashy, through Scump. I think specifically Dashy and Scump are going to be pretty important for this series. Scump usually performs in this series, so I'd like to get him in a little bit as well. So that'll be what I'm looking at. When it comes to team slot, I know I rarely touch on this, but Optic should be a really good leverage team slot. They're going to be super low owned because Atlanta FaZe is mispriced. So give me a sub 15, sub 20% Optic Texas team slot here. They're relatively affordable, and they're going to be pretty low owned. And if Optic win the series, I think they're probably going to win Search and Destroys. So they're going to put up some good team slot points, I think, here as well. And I think that kind of covers everything. So we can get rid of FaZe and maybe add Optic here and see how that shakes things up. We know it's going to be Dashy, Temp Gravity, Hydra. I think these stats are maybe a little bit low, but I'd pump up the Optic ones a little bit. But maybe that just kind of brings in some more ability to get in like the guys I was talking about with maybe Temp, Gravity, Hydra, etc. Yeah, that'll be it for me today. So best luck to you guys. Last game of the week, unfortunately, so I'll be seeing you guys for Call of Duty next week. So hopefully we can end this week on a W. We had a good win on Friday. Saturday was not that great. Maybe we can bring it back here at the Sunday matches. I always don't like the Saturday ones. The 4 gamers make it a little weird. So hopefully get back on these 3 gamers, but get back on the right side, and that'll be it. So I will be seeing you guys sometime next week for some more Call of Duty breakdowns.